On the 1st of July, the world quietly marked a birthday that will never be celebrated with candles or cake. Diana, Princess of Wales, would have turned 65. The woman the world once called the people's princess has been gone for nearly 3 decades. Yet on this single date every year, something extraordinary happens. Britain pauses. And this year, what her eldest son did on that pause left the entire nation in tears. To understand why this day matters so much, you have to go back to the beginning. Diana Frances Spencer was born on July the 1st, 1961, in a quiet corner of Norfolk, the daughter of a viscount, a girl who grew up playing in the same fields the royal family once roamed during their holidays. She never could have imagined that one day she would marry into that very family, and that her life, however brief, would rewrite what it meant to be royal. She became the Princess of Wales at just 20 years old, standing at the altar of St. Paul's Cathedral in a wedding watched by hundreds of millions across the globe. But the fairy tale, as the world would come to learn, was never quite what it seemed. Behind the glittering tiaras and the perfectly tailored gowns was a young woman navigating a world that never truly let her in. And through it all, she held on to one thing fiercely: her sons. William and Harry were not raised behind palace walls the way royal children before them had been. Diana broke tradition. She took them to amusement parks, to fast food restaurants, to homeless shelters, places no future king had ever been expected to set foot. She wanted her boys to see the world as it truly was, not the version filtered through palace windows. And it was on one of those visits, to a shelter called the Passage in Westminster, that something was planted in a young William that would take root for the rest of his life. He was 10, maybe 11 years old, the first time his mother brought him through those doors. He has since described feeling anxious, uncertain of what to expect, watching his mother move through the room with an ease that startled him, laughing, joking, making people who had nothing feel like they mattered. It was, in his own words, the moment he began to understand that life looked different for other people than it did for him. That single visit became the seed of something much larger. Decades later, as a grown man, a husband, and a father of 3, William would turn that childhood memory into a mission. In 2023, he launched an ambitious 5-year initiative called Homewards, a program built on a simple but radical goal: to make homelessness in Britain rare, brief, and, most importantly, unrepeated. Not managed. Not tolerated. Ended. And so, on the very day his mother would have turned 65, William did not spend his time behind closed doors mourning quietly, as many expected. Instead, he stood in front of cameras, in front of the public, in front of a nation still healing from a loss it never fully processed, and he spoke. Not about grief. About action. The occasion was the 3rd anniversary of Homewards, and William used the moment to deliver what many are now calling one of the most personal and powerful addresses of his public life. He told the crowd that homelessness is not a personal failure, but a systemic one, and that if the systems in place had helped create the crisis, then those same systems could be rebuilt to prevent it. It was a message delivered with a rare intensity, the kind that comes only from a man who has carried something in his chest since childhood and finally found the words for it. But it wasn't the speech alone that brought Britain to tears. It was what came after, the quiet, deeply human moments that followed. William moved through the crowd the way his mother once had, stopping to speak with people who had once slept on the streets and now stood before him with stable jobs and homes of their own because of the very program he built in her memory. Reports from those close to the event described grown men fighting back tears as the Prince of Wales knelt down, listened, and thanked them by name. For a nation that watched Diana walk through minefields and hospital wards touching the untouchable, the parallel was impossible to ignore. Here was her son, decades later, on what should have been her birthday, doing the very thing she was once mocked and criticized for doing, treating the forgotten as if they were never forgotten at all. And then, almost as if timed by fate itself, William brought his own son into the fold. This past Christmas, in a moment that quietly moved millions online, 12-year-old Prince George was seen helping prepare a Christmas meal at that very same shelter his father had visited as a boy. The shelter Diana first brought William to more than 30 years earlier. 3 generations, one unbroken thread of compassion, stitched together across time by a woman who never lived to see how far her lesson would travel. It is this, the continuity, the refusal to let her legacy fade into old photographs and museum plaques, that has struck such a deep chord with the British public. Diana has been gone for 29 years, and yet here was her grandson, a child she never met, carrying forward the exact same instinct she carried into the shelter as a young mother trying to teach her son something no tutor or governess ever could. Social media flooded within hours of the tribute becoming public. Comments poured in from people who had grown up watching Diana on television, from young royal fans who had only ever known her through old footage and documentaries, all saying some version of the same thing, that she would be proud that this was exactly the kind of birthday tribute she would have wanted. No lavish parties, no grand statues, just her son quietly out in the world doing good in her name. Some royal watchers noted the emotional weight of the timing itself. Just 3 months earlier, on Mother's Day, William had shared a rare and tender photograph of himself as a toddler sitting with Diana in a field of wildflowers at Highgrove, a moment that had already brought many to tears online. To see him now, months later, honoring her not with another photograph but with tangible action, felt to many like the closing of a circle. Words turned into deeds, memory turned into movement. There is something quietly devastating about watching a son carry his mother's absence the way William has. He was only 15 when she died, a boy thrust into grief in front of the entire world, forced to walk behind her coffin as cameras captured every flicker of his face. For years, the public wondered how that kind of trauma might shape him. Now, nearly 3 decades later, the answer has become clear. It shaped him into a man who refuses to let her memory become static, who insists on keeping her spirit breathing through action rather than nostalgia. Perhaps that is the truest gift a child can give a parent who is no longer here. Not a monument, not a tribute speech, but a living continuation of the values they tried to instill. Diana spent her life trying to show her sons that royalty means nothing if it isn't used to lift others up. On what would have been her 65th birthday, her son proved, once again, that the lesson never left him. Britain did not need fireworks or grand ceremony to feel her presence that day. All it took was watching her son kneel beside a stranger, listen without hurry, and thank him by name. And somewhere, in that small, unglamorous moment, an entire nation felt her again. That is fame untold. Untold stories. Real emotions. No filters. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next hidden chapter of the lives that shaped us all.